My favorite is the cross-functional collaboration. To me, that is key.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the important relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Darlene Nordstrom. And here are 3 things you want to know about Darlene before we start. She is the Director of Pricing Strategy at Wolters Kluwer. She was in pricing at IBM, and I don't think I've ever talked to an IBM pricing person, so this is going to be exciting. And last year, she completed trifecta Spartan races, which meant she was in amazing shape last year. Welcome, Darlene.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, this is going to be fun. First question, how'd you get into pricing?
Well, I was at IBM, actually. I was actually started out in finance department. A pricing role opened up in IBM and took the opportunity and seized it and to learn a lot more about pricing. And I never looked back. I loved it. It brought me to the front of the house instead of looking in the rearview mirror. And I found it very dynamic and exciting. And there's always things to learn. So I stuck with it for all these years since.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Finance is looking in the rearview mirror. And pricing is kind of at the front, right? We're looking out the front window.
Exactly.
So most people, when I talk to them from finance, they think pricing is really about cost plus, it's about margin. And is that how the finance people at IBM thought?
No, there was a big component of that. But what I have to say is I think in B2B where everyone thinks that they own pricing, right? In B2B, it seems like. And a common thing that I always hear is everyone touches on pricing, but no one owns it, right? So product thinks that they own it because they have P&L responsibility. Sales thinks they own it. They're closest to the customer. Finance thinks they own it because they manage cost and margin. But what I found successful and what worked in IBM and other companies that I've been in is setting up a cross-functional collaboration team, right? So you have pricing's a team sport, right? In my view, it's highly interconnected. And so how do you actually navigate that? You have input from various parts of the organization, like sales and marketing and product, very valuable insights, right? And since everybody feels like they have their hand in it, the best way to navigate that is through a cross-functional collaboration effort. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has their inputs. And you work through all of the pricing actions and proposals through a cross-functional way. And if there's any need for escalation, there is, one person who at the end of the day is accountable. So as long as you have like clear roles and responsibilities, that function or that kind of operation model works very, very well. And that's where I got to see a lot of the other side of the business in terms of markets and segments and customers, instead of looking at it in the rearview mirror from a finance perspective.
Yeah. So I love that answer. That was really good. On the whole collaboration piece, one of the things I find, and by the way, I think you hinted or gave us the answer to this, but I'm going to push a little bit farther. One of the problems I always see in collaboration is that we don't agree, right? Somehow sales doesn't agree with product and, we need lower prices. We need higher prices. I won't even say who says which, but there's this disagreement of what it is we want to do. And somebody has to make the decision, right? Mm-hmm. In the end, there has to be a decision maker. And it feels to me like collaboration is all that person's responsibility. Because if they know they have the authority to make a decision, they don't really have to talk to other people. but they really have to talk to other people if we're going to have collaboration. So how did that work?
So I've seen it work a couple of ways, and specifically in IBM, it was a voting process. Each function had a vote, and each function had a delegation. And if you weren't able to show up to the meeting, you delegate somebody else. And you have to make sure that it is somebody within that function that has authority to make decisions, right? Someone a little bit higher up that can actually make those decisions. So it was more of like a democratic vote to get to an answer.
So the most votes won, or was there still a decision maker?
Well, it was more of an approval. Do you approve it or you don't? It wasn't like you give 3 different options and you vote on which option is best. So what I failed to probably give you any details behind is there's a lot of prep and work that goes before that committee actually meets. So I encourage, successful pricing teams get out of their comfort zone. They get out of their own silos, right? You make sure you set up processes so that it fosters that collaboration and communication before you even go to the price committee with your proposal. So often, me being in finance as a pricing analyst, when I first started in the role of pricing, I would work with the product team. I would work with the marketing team. I would get out of my silo in finance, learn about the business from the customer's point of view, put that customer hat on, and also from the lens of the business and the company as a whole, right? What was encouraged in these pricing committees was that you look at it from the business as a whole and not just your function. So what serves the business and what serves the customer best was always encouraged. So a lot of work went in before the proposal came forward. So a lot of vetting and discussion, and research and analysis went into building the, why we came up with the proposal to support the proposal. And then you would vote, either you approve or you reject. If it rejected, there would be some action items to go back and rework the proposal and then come forward again.
So this sounds like a lot of work. Do you do this for minor price increases, or do you do this for major projects? How do you decide we're going to go through this amount of effort or not go through this amount of effort?
Yeah, so I would say it was mostly for larger efforts, and it was mostly around new product introductions or changes to your pricing and packaging, revamping your pricing and packaging strategies. For your normal kind of day-to-day stuff, it wasn't. And for, your annual price increases, it wasn't. There was it was more of a center of excellence that set standards and we had a corporate strategy team that acted as a center of excellence, similar to, Walter Schooler, where we're setting up a center of excellence here, where you define the standards around processes, what the technology stack is, sharing the best practices. And that could be around our annual price increases, right? So that would be driven from a center of excellence or a pricing strategy team. And then within each of the divisions and BUs, you would have, it was a little bit more matrixed, right, in terms of having, pricing teams, dedicated pricing teams that support the different divisions and business units, and dotted line to the general managers or CEOs within those divisions and business units.
Okay, ready for a really hard question?
Sure.
So it seems to me that we have all these different departments that we have to collaborate with that are making decisions. What does pricing have to do with what does the pricing team or a pricing person have to do with any of this? Why are we even there?
Oh, yeah, having a dedicated pricing team. Well, because like I said in my opening statement, right, like everyone thinks they own pricing. So having a dedicated pricing team where that person usually is responsible for setting up those processes and creating those processes for collaboration, communication, they're the ones who really set up those cadences and those calls, right? And bring all the parties to the table. Oftentimes when I do that, the biggest thing that I hear from all the cross-functional departments is like, wow, this is great. We never had this structure before. So really it's just having a body that owns it and just says, we're going to create this collaborative effort, and taking it one step further, not just setting up collaboration on what your pricing strategy and your list prices are going to be, but also circling back. So the pricing team is also responsible for doing some of the, it is kind of like rearview mirror, but doing some of the analytics, right? And feeding those KPIs and insights back to that same price committee to say, okay, what's working, what's not working? Let's come up with a solution. Maybe it's a short-term promotion, or maybe there's a new competitor, or something that's been newly introduced into the market that we need to rethink our pricing and packaging strategy. So it's a constant kind of iteration of your pricing strategy, and the pricing team helps kind of facilitate that whole, I call it a flywheel, right? You don't set it,
Yep.
You don't set your price once and done. You just keep reiterating it. And the pricing team is responsible for providing those meaningful insights, getting into that root cause analysis, not just throwing some KPIs in a dashboard in front of the team, but actually digging a little bit deeper, even, interviewing the sales team to see what's working or not working, to match qualitative with quantitative and feed that back to the committee.
Yeah. So let me add a couple of thoughts to what you just said, and then you can tell me if you like them or dislike them, or agree or disagree with them. But one thought is, it seems to me that pricing departments in big companies with lots and lots of divisions, these pricing people tend to act more as internal consultants. So it isn't, I'm going to go tell you what to do, I'm going to go tell you how to set your price. It's really, where do we see the low-hanging fruit? We're asking good questions, but we know a lot about pricing, which not everybody in the company is an expert on. So that just makes sense that you have these internal pricing people that know this. And the other thing I really like about this process is, as these internal pricing consultants, we don't know the value of every product. Right. There's no way that we could go in and set a price because we don't know what it should be. All we know how to do is ask questions of the people that know the answers to those questions.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Any type of pricing project that I take on is really about just that, is really trying to handhold and teach the various functions. What are the things that you typically look at to set up your pricing strategy and your pricing? So I think that's really the value add that the pricing team brings to a large corporation.
Nice. In the back of my mind, I've had this thought just been floating lately, and that is breaking pricing up into short-term efforts and long-term efforts. Do you ever think that way? Does that, when I think of short-term efforts, you could think of that as, I want to go raise prices. I want to go do a price segmentation technique we haven't done before because I can make an instantaneous impact. Mm-hmm. And long-term efforts I think of as, I want to tweak the product portfolio. I want to pick better market segments and build better products. And so do you guys think that way at all? Has that been crossing your mind?
It does. I think that you have to balance short-term with long-term. Oftentimes what you shouldn't do is make short-term decisions that will impact your long-term goals, right? Being short-sighted and reacting. You don't want to end up in a price war and react because, a competitor did something. So I think you always have to be thinking in terms of that end goal in mind and work backwards. And maybe there are some iterative steps that you could take to get to that end goal. So I'd be careful about kind of making some short-term decisions that impact your long-term goals. That's what I would, that would be my advice. But you could look at, based on some of the analytics that you do, you uncover some things that you may want to test in the short term, even like I said, short-term promotions, to test something in a market. Or if you're looking to move towards a longer term platform strategy, there may be some steps, in between to get you there that you make, in terms, instead of doing a whole repackaging overhaul. that you map out phases. And that I would suggest you work closely with the product team and look at the product roadmap and build monetization throughout the roadmap to get there.
Yeah. Why are we building the new feature? Why are we building the new product?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for it? Why would they pay for it? How much would they pay for it?
Right. Yeah. You don't want to get into a reactive mode in the short terms. Like say, there's a large customer that has a requirement and then all of a sudden that becomes a priority in the roadmap and that sacrifices the long-term, vision and, building out the right features that solve, the customer pain points in the long run.
Yeah. So you had talked about how you think of this as a flywheel and your pricing team is doing monitoring and you talk about this backwards looking. And so I want to tie all this together for a second. When I teach, I often tell companies to get finance involved with the monitoring and the KPI. And I say that because my gut says that finance really wants to be involved with pricing. They just don't know how. And so if we give them the task or the request to say, hey, would you help us monitor these KPIs, create these reports, these data points, it gives us the ability to watch what's going on. So do you rely on your finance department or does your pricing team have to go do the work to build these reports?
Oftentimes it's the pricing team that is pulling the reports. In other companies that I've been in, that we would have a dedicated data person who would actually pull from, build a data lake so that we can pull some of the pricing analytics that we wanted to look at. Now, having said that, we partnered, with finance. In fact, we recruited some finance folks because they do have really strong analytical background and can navigate Excel very well. But we did have our own dedicated, data guru who would pull, pricing and analytics that we wanted to look at.
Yeah. One of the things I love about finance is they have access to all the data in the company, right? So they don't hide anything from finance and they are very good at whatever BI tool you're using and Excel. So it's a powerful team to have on your side.
Yeah. Finance sometimes doesn't have access to, or they have to figure out how to get access to some of the pricing data or fields, right? Because a lot of what they do is looking at revenue reported, which would be different than what pricing would look at in terms of what's on the invoice, what's the quantity, what's the price, and what was billed, not in terms of what was recognized as revenue, because that could skew your insights. So there was always that bridge of between finance and pricing of here's revenue reported, but here's actually what was billed, right?
Okay, so I want to ask a secret question about IBM. You don't have to answer it if you think it's proprietary and you're not supposed to. Most big companies, I find, give lip service to value-based pricing and rely relatively heavily on cost-plus pricing. And yet IBM, I could imagine they don't, that they're actually truly a value-based pricing organization.
Yeah, when I was there, which was, I don't want to date myself, but it's been many years, so I don't know if things have
It was a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's a couple years ago. But yeah, I mean, while finance, we looked at margins, but we never did cost plus pricing. At least in the role that I was in, it was always more of a perspective of, I would say we did some competitor based pricing, not ideal, but we did some competitor based pricing, not true, value based, but, I would say that it gave us some insights into where we might want to land relative to our alternatives, and whether we were, a premium leader or not. And IBM tend to have a view in their perspective as being the premium in the space, right? The premium price, the premium service, the premium software, premium hardware. So we always priced, at a premium.
So I don't know if you meant this or not when you said it, but I think competitor-based pricing is or can be value-based pricing. Because I think of it this way. our customers decide between my product and a competitor's product. And what I have to know is what's the value that I add that they don't. So what's the value of the difference in the products? And so therefore my price has to be relative to their price, but I don't have to be equal to their price. So I think if someone's choosing between my product and a competitor's product, I have to do competitor-based pricing, but we're going to add a layer of value on top of it. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate?
Yeah. No, what you said at the end there is that it's that differential value, right? I think I'm a big fan of looking at the differential value, making as long as you do your homework and are able to understand what your differential value is. I guess when I spoke about using just competitor-based pricing without that value perspective is just because your competitor priced one way doesn't mean they got it right. So just make sure you have that in the back of your mind that we don't always have to match or equal the competitor. Oftentimes when I do competitive research and competitive analysis, I think about, I always think in the back of my head, did they get it right? I don't think it's a bad approach at all, actually, as long as you're looking at it from a differential value perspective.
Yeah. And even if they got it wrong, we still have to be relative to them. Right. So if they underprice dramatically, if we want to sell anything, we have to be relative to them. Now, point. The one place I would agree completely is what if they got the pricing model wrong? Right. So what if they're selling, if they're renting movies by the night and we decide we want to sell a subscription to DVDs instead? Now that's getting the business model wrong. And I'm totally with you on that one. Did they get that
yes.
right? Right.
Yes. I've been in that boat before too. Yes. Where, in my analysis and research that I've discovered that a competitor, I didn't believe that they had the right pricing metric. We call it a pricing metric, right? On what you count. So there's some due diligence and some homework to do to, show the proof to sales and the rest of the, cross-functional team, why that may be the right or the wrong price metric. So it's just a little extra, homework to do.
Yeah. Have you gotten to experience the idea of changing a pricing metric for a product? And how hard was it if you did?
Yes. It's extremely hard because, it depends, I should say. It depends on how much insight you have into the customer's usage. It depends on, how much insight you have into the potential new metric that you're going to. So if you're going from users to assets, do you know how many assets they would be going to? That gets a little bit tricky to be able to do some impact analysis and size up, the new pricing that they would pay going forward if you don't have some insights into their usage or what that new metric might be. So yeah, that's always like that becomes very tricky.
Yeah. And even if you know that you're right, it's still got to be hard because you've got systems inside your company that to fix. You've got salespeople that you've got to train. You've got marketing you've got to talk about differently. And then we get to train our customers. So it's like, this is not a trivial thing to do.
No, it's not a trivial thing to do. And then it could take 3 to 5 years to even migrate your customers, even after you've already trained your sales team, trained your deals desk, set up the processes, set up the new pricing. It could still take another 3 to 5 years to eventually migrate your existing install base over.
So we would agree this is something you want to do only when it's going to put a lot of profit in our company, right? When it really makes sense.
Yes. Yes. When it really makes sense to do so. Yes.
Nice. All right. Darlene, this is a lot of fun. I love hearing your stories, but let's ask the final question and see where we go for this.
Sure.
What is one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Only one I could pick?
Yeah. Your favorite.
My favorite is the cross-functional collaboration. To me, that is key. That's been successful in my 15 plus years of doing pricing, is having that cross-functional collaboration where everyone feels like they have a voice.
Yeah, I think that absolutely is key. And it's partly to make sure everybody feels they have a voice. And it's also to make sure that you've heard all the different inputs. So even if you get to be king of the world and make all the decisions, if you haven't heard all these different departments and what they have to say, and then you make your edict, it may not go well.
Exactly. Right.
So fabulous. Darlene, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Darlene Nordstrom. I'm there all the time.
Okay. And do you shop at Nordstrom's too, by the way? I just wanted to ask that.
I do shop there. I wish that, my husband and his family owned it, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
Because then you'd get a discount.
Then I'd get a discount. Yes. And then I wouldn't be doing what I love, pricing, right?
Right. Exactly. So to our listeners, thank you so much for your time today. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? You can go to ratethispodcast.com/impact pricing to make it easier to figure out. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.